Sorry to bother you, Katie. I got it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on a Friday afternoon. Okay, looks like folks are all jumping on. Wait, just a beat. So thank you again for coming to our info workshop today. As a friendly reminder, we do record these workshops, so this meeting will be recorded. And we will, during the meeting, if you have any questions, anything that you'd like to add, please feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, ask the question. Also feel free to use that chat function, and we'll be monitoring that during the call if you all have anything that you'd like to add. I am happy to introduce our probation partner, FieldWare. Karen Peterson and Susan Rice are presenters today. And with that, I will pass it over to FieldWare. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Hey, thank you, Nikki. Appreciate it. We are using today a polling system called Mentimeter. So first thing we have here are just instructions on the screen. So how you can join. You can join with your cell phone. You can either scan the QR code that we have right here, or if you maybe already have a Mentimeter account, you can go to Mentimeter and sign into your account. We've got the meeting code here, the 2198-3363. It's just kind of a fun way for us to get some interaction from all of you. We've got some questions for you. So please feel free to scan the QR code, sign up, and get that started. And then I'm just going to wait just a minute or so people can do that. And then we'll start the live portion of the webinar. I guess we're live already, but it seems like there were a few people that were still logging on.
And if, when you have signed on, kind of give us maybe a thumbs up or in the chat, like say that you're good to go so we can kind of get a gauge on, because we want this to be interactive and kind of fun for a Friday, and really get some input and thoughts, from you guys. That's what this is today. It's more about like really getting a good feel of where everyone is, what's working for you, what are things that you still feel you need for your office, for your staff. So, hopefully we get, some good conversation out of this.
Mm-hmm.
So just let us know when you are logged on to the Mentimeter.
What do you think? You think we're good, or?
Got one thumbs up.
Yay.
I think it was Kelly. So Kelly, you're going to answer for everybody. Oh, Vanessa. Okay, awesome.
If we had candy, we'd like toss you all a piece of candy for doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
If we were in person, that's exactly what you would get.
Mm-hmm.
Do some bribing. Anybody need more time? And the answers in Mentimeter are anonymous, so we don't know who says what, in case you're worried about that. All right, Oscar, way to go. Okay. It's up to you, Susan. You're running right now.
I say we get going, so let's just dive right on in. So the title of our webinar today is Strengthening Probation Teams, Modern Tools for a Sustainable Workforce. And I will tell you that Karen and I both, we're going to introduce ourselves, but we both come from the system, from the field. But I know for myself at least, like I'm not an expert on any of this, but we've worked pretty hard to try to put some good information together to share with all of you. But again, we definitely want your participation, your ideas. For me, that's always been the best way to learn. I love to learn from other people with what they're doing and what's working well. Okay, so this is Karen and I, and you can see that we have a little beach theme going here because we would both much rather be at the beach right now. You all are lucky in California. The beach is not too far away. For us, it's a little bit of a distance, but this time next week we will be at the beach. So we're doing a kind of a long girls' weekend away and having a little bit of free time and relaxation. So we did this to prepare ourselves for the beach. Um, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So I am located in Indiana, and my experience comes from I worked in the field for 33 years. Most of that time as a chief probation officer. I had a couple years as a line officer, and then was promoted to chief early in my career. So I spent most of my time doing that. Um, Worked with both adult and juvenile probation. I am a person too that likes to be really involved in other associations and organizations. So I did a lot with our professional association here in Indiana, and then eventually got involved with APPA. I'm currently serving as president of APPA for another 24 days, I believe. My term will be over at the end of June. But like I said, I like to learn from other people. That's been one of the greatest things for me with APPA is just being able to meet people from all over the country, learn from them, learn what they're doing. And then I used a lot of the ideas back in my department when I would do that. Currently now I retired from probation and I'm working for FieldWare, which is a software company. We provide software to help agencies well, we talk about let's work smarter, not harder. And that's what a lot of our software does. So we're not going to try to sell you anything today. I want to make that clear up front. But we are going to talk about a few of the solutions that we've used with some of our partners. And we do have several partners in the state of California. I lead our customer support and customer success team. So that just means that I try to keep people happy and make sure everybody has what they need moving forward. And yeah, just try to keep you all happy. Karen, do you want to introduce yourself? Do you want me to do it?
Um, I can go ahead. So, my name's Karen Peterson. I live just north of Susan in Michigan. And I also, come from working, I'm a criminal justice major, government worker by trade. Started my career juvenile probation in Flint. Everybody's heard of Flint because of the, water crisis back in the day. And then it ended up migrating a little south to a county just north of Detroit in community corrections. And I was a supervisor for 23 years, mainly bounced between supervising a treatment program for sentenced felons and then with our pretrial unit, doing work with them. And I was a user of FieldWare before coming to work for FieldWare. So the county that I worked for still uses FieldWare. And they have 1,800 people on remote check-in for our pretrial program that utilizes the system. And it was just kind of a natural transition for me when I'm gonna say loosely retired and came to work over there. I'm also a trainer for the Carry Group. So those that use Carry guides or anything like that, I've been with Carry Group for 8 years. So I've done just a very small bit of training in California. But now again, fast forward to working with FieldWare. So I moved from account management to more of a solutions engineer, which is odd for a criminal justice major. And kind of a consultant. So working with agencies, finding out what their needs are, how we can fit those needs, and help them be successful in, their mission and what they're trying to do and with workflow and help officers. So that's really where we're going to focus today on too is just about those things. So really finding out where you all are, what are your needs, what's working well, maybe where you need some help with and some of the struggles, and maybe sharing some thoughts and ideas between everybody. So anyway, enough about us. Go for it, Susan.
We will move on. Okay, so we're going to start with Mentimeter. We want to make sure it's working for everyone. So if you pull up Mentimeter, you should be, if you're live in there now, you should be able to see my question on your phone. And our question is, if your job were a type of weather, what would it be? If you type your answer in and hit send or whatever prompt you get, we should start seeing answers coming up on the screen.
And the QR code is also in the chat, it looks like. Stormy.
We knew we would see hurricane.
Yeah, I was like hurricane all day. I
Oh, it
love
was sunny.
sunny.
I liked that.
Oh, I like that. That's nice.
This is a
Flash
glasses
flood.
half full person, right? Flash flood.
I love it. And please make sure this is again interactive. If you've got questions, either unmute and feel free to interrupt us. We don't care. Or put in the chat, and we're keeping an eye on the chat as well. I love it.
These
I
are
love these
great,
answers.
and clearly it's working. So that's what we wanted to see. Freak thunderstorms. I love that. I know I agree with all of these. And I think it's pretty funny how we all sort of have that, like, things can be okay for a while and running well and sunny, like we said. And then all of a sudden, you get the flash flood that comes in or the hurricane. Like every day for me was different. And it was all those days I thought would be just nice and calm and I could get some things done. And then, you have 10 fires to put out and all these other crazy things that come up. So it looks like we all kind of think along the same lines in here. All right. All right. So we were going to talk a little bit about probation in California and what that looks like. And I think Karen, that's
That
you.
is me. Oh yeah, I'm not paying attention to where I'm supposed to be jumping in. So we're going to kind of bounce back and forth. So, I have been meeting, part of my job is meeting with different states and different areas and finding out all about like the landscape, what's going on in every state. And what I found is in every state, it's insanely, vastly different. Everyone from DOC down to local probation to counties, to community corrections, to everybody, everyone manages things very differently, like very differently. So in California, I did speak to somebody at California Department of Corrections, kind of got the larger landscape from a very high level. My understanding is, they do parole. That's their area. And then what was interesting to me about California is that about 50% or so, and I've even talked to a few other people in different counties that's like, well, it's probably more than 50% of those released from prison actually get pushed back to the counties to supervise, which is very unique actually to California in a lot of the country that I've spoken with. So when thinking about everything that the counties are doing, you're doing a lot. And I just want to say that, like, I recognize that in talking to a lot of the different states. So you're doing, felony, not just felony, but like folks that are released from prison that they're not keeping, that DOC is not keeping, misdemeanor, so the PRCS, the mandatory supervision, you've got juvenile, you've got pretrial. In some counties, my understanding is not everyone is doing pretrial. And so, you have a lot going on. Now, the one thing that ever since I've been talking to everybody, the other thing I have noticed consistently is budget reductions. I know, shocker, and staffing shortage. And so going through this, when Susan and I were trying to figure out what we wanted to present today, we really wanted to talk from professionals, from us being in, working, in the system to other professionals. And, we all went through these things, budget reductions, staffing shortage. So we really wanted to focus in on, how, when these things are affecting you, how do you manage that? What do you do with that? And, now working with a software company or a technology company, it's like, now how do we look at technology to help with some of these, issues that are going on? So again, it is about, leveraging technology. So that's going to be our primary focus. And again, if you have thoughts or ideas or comments, please put in the chat or, or go ahead and unmute if you want to, no problem. Just as an overview. So we're looking for how do we become more efficient, using technology to become more efficient in our workflow. How do we help our officers, manage? How do we sustain our staff when we lose them? How do we stop them from leaving? We're going to talk as we get into the presentation more about the workforce and the current flavor of the workforce these days. So it's about streamlining workflows. How do we do that? Reducing administrative burden, right? Because so much falls on management, right? To take care of, juggle all this stuff that's going on. How do we keep the people that we're working with, right? The probationers, the defendants, how do we keep them engaged? And as the pendulum has swung to a point where now officers are being like, okay, so best practice, what's best practice? Best practices, engaging them more, risk levels, doing risk assessments, doing case planning, and then how do officers work with them, based on those criminogenic risk factors, to make them successful. So it's become not compliance based so much anymore. And so with all these things changing, how do you use technology to give officers that time, boost engagement, and support your workforce?
Okay, we have another question for all of you. What is the biggest challenge your team encounters when adopting new technology? So we're looking for things like budget constraints, staff isn't interested in it, or other factors that you've seen when you've tried to utilize technology to help your department run more smoothly. Budget. Look how big budget keeps getting bigger.
It gets bigger. The more people say the same thing, the larger it gets.
More budget. Oh, I like that. Lack of training. Adaptation. Okay. Okay.
That's some good answers.
Mm-hmm. And then we have one other question that goes along with this. How has limited technology impacted your ability to provide effective supervision? So this may be, like, oh, we don't think it has, or it's, held us back from being able to do some things that we've wanted to do. Okay. Karen, I question for you. So as they're putting in answers here, so stretches your staff too thin. How many clients were you able to supervise in your county on like remote, using technology and using remote reporting? Because it always shocks me when I hear the number.
So I think, I never thought we were unique, but I really think we were unique. The more I, again, talk to people around the country and all the different states and really get an idea of how everybody's handling things, and again, I'm speaking to pretrial. So my county had about 1,800 people on pretrial. We, had people on EM, standard pretrial, our magistrates love to and judges love to overcondition people on bond. So they had a lot of things. They had to do testing. They had to do treatment. They had to, get assessments. They had to show us their medication bottles to show why they'd be positive for something. I mean, they had to do a lot while they were out on bond. And with that being said, my staff, now we had everybody was on remote check-in. We never saw anybody in person. We never went out in the field to see people on bond. It was all remote. With that being said, because of being able to use technology to help staff, their caseloads ranged from anywhere from, I'd say, for EM, it was like around 90 for people that were on EM. And then those that had standard supervision, it was anywhere from 300 to 450 people. And that was gathering, and that was still talking to people, addressing if they were positive for drug tests, doing reports for every court date that they had, whether they were compliant or not compliant. That was the standard we had. Very busy, very busy. And I look at them now and they're very busy. Their numbers have not gone down in the 2.5 years since I left. But it's manageable. And that's what I find when I, talk to people about it. It's utilizing technology to lift that burden, or that, help your staff be able to manage things. And again, I think we were unique in the fact that everyone was, calling in, weekly and biweekly, but.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, it always surprises me when I hear that number, because, and hear 300 and 400 people being supervised by one officer. But it goes to a lot of the comments that we're seeing here that, your staff is stretched too thin and people don't work as quickly as maybe they could. So it has a lot to do with that. All right. So I can skip through that. So here's, kind of same kind of stuff, but things that we're seeing. We know that budget is a huge issue. Nobody ever has enough money. And if you do have extra money, somebody always comes to take it away, it seems like. So budget is definitely something to look at. I think we're going to talk a little bit about, how technology can maybe help ease some of your budget concerns. Because again, if you can have one officer supervising 300 clients as opposed to 3 officers supervising 300 clients, sometimes it makes sense to invest a little bit in technology, and be able to replace some of those in-person folks and officers, which we don't ever want to say like, oh, let's lay off probation officers. We don't need as many. We always need more, right? But if you can realign where your folks are working, and we're going to talk too about filling staff positions, and everybody is struggling with this right now. So is technology something that can step in and help with that? Staff resistant to change. Isn't it funny that our job is to get our clients to change what what they should be doing and how they behave in society? But when we go in and ask our staff to change, they just throw a fit. And I always, I just always chuckled about that. And I would make these comments with my staff when they didn't want to do something new. I'm like, what do we do every day with our clients? We ask them to change. I'm asking you to make a few changes to make things better in our office. But I think we all know that that is a huge barrier that you deal with, with everything, right? Anytime you introduce something new, there's some people that are like, this is great. Yeah, let's do it. And then you've got those people that are like, I've done it this way for 30 years and it's worked. And why would I want to do anything else? And I think what we usually know is like, well, really, it's not working very well. So that's why we want to look at something different. I think somebody in the chat had mentioned training. So lack of proper training on new systems, always an issue. I know, we did a lot of training in our office on evidence-based practices and the kinds of programs that should be using, things like the carry guides that Karen indicated she teaches about. And it's great when you first learn all that stuff, but if you don't have that follow-up with your staff and making sure that they're still implementing those programs and using them correctly, after a while, people start to forget about them, or they use them, but they're not using them the way that they should be. So that's always an issue there is, how do we keep up on training? How do we keep our staff up on the training that they need to have. Privacy concerns sometimes can be an issue with technology, and especially in our system. We work with a lot of information that's confidential. So people sometimes, get a little concerned about, are we able to keep that confidentiality and privacy for our clients? We're collecting a lot of data from them. What does that look like? And so regardless of whatever kind of technology you decide you might want to use, that's something that definitely needs to be addressed, and you need to make sure companies that you're working with are protecting your data and protecting, the information about your clients. Tech issues, downtime, compatibility, security challenges, issues with any kind of technology, right? The nice thing about as technology advances, I think some of those issues become a little less of a concern. I remember in our department, and it was probably 20 years ago, but our case management system crashed. I mean, the whole thing just crashed. They thought it was backed up and it wasn't. So the company that we were working with literally paid my officers and myself, and we would come in after hours and start putting our data back into the system. So it was a really long process, but we got it done. But my staff after that, they continued to keep like paper notes, written notes on things for years and years and years. And as our technology got better and our, systems got better, they would still do that. And as a chief, I'm like, you're wasting so much time, right? You're doing double work because you're putting notes in the computer and then you're writing down notes, and and they'd be like, yeah, but remember that time our system crashed? Like, I do, but that was 15 years ago. Like, we need to move on for this. So fortunately, again, I think as technology advances, some of those issues become a little, it's not that they're not still important, but maybe they're not as concerning as what they used to be. We've talked a little bit about staff shortages. This is nationwide and I hear it everywhere. It is hard for people to find individuals who are qualified to serve as probation officers, which is, like in our count or in my state, you just have to have a college degree to be a probation officer. It's like the only requirement. You have to have a college degree. You have to be a decent person, but everything else we teach to folks. So it's amazing to me now. Like, they can't even find people to meet minimum standards, and I hear that all over the country. So I think I hear a lot of people now that have multiple openings for officers, where it used to be, it was really hard to get your foot in the door because there just weren't a lot of openings out there. And then one thing we see a lot too, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but generational divides. So what do our staff members look like now compared to, what we, well, I don't say what we looked like 20 years ago, but those of us who are older, the things that are important to us and that we kind of grew up in the system with, a lot of those things aren't important to newer staff. So how do we, as people who've been in the system for a longer period of time, as chiefs a lot, how do we deal with that, and how do we compensate for that, so that when we do hire new people who have different thoughts, different values, how do we keep them around? Right? We can't treat them the same way we treat the baby boomers or millennials. We have to look at things differently. Okay.
Okay, it is my turn. So,
All right.
again, any, thoughts or questions? Hopefully we're kind of hitting some like, yep, we're going through this. This is very relevant, hopefully, to what everybody seems to be going through again, not just in California, but all over the place. But again, it is, we really want to stress about getting creative with caseloads, and how do you use technology to get creative, right? So really thinking outside the box. And that's one of the things I think I find with this new role that I've taken on is, talking to different agencies and saying, okay, let's brainstorm. What are you doing right now? What's working? What's best practice? What can you utilize, to do all the things that we've already talked about? Um, you know, risk-based supervision. It's APPA release their standards. This is all best practice, using validated assessments. You want to make sure that you're supervising them and aligning them with their risk level. So whether you have a bank caseload, low risk, medium, high, I don't know, I've seen it where officers get a sprinkling of everybody. I've seen it where they have like specific caseloads based upon different, risk levels and or needs, or even, somebody has a mental health caseload or a gender-based caseload or, different things like that. So what this does though, by a risk-based caseload, it does shift officers' focus, so if you have somebody on low risk, you kind of scale back on those folks because best practice and all the research says that people who are low risk are generally self-correcting, right? We don't need to over supervise them. We actually do more harm than good when you over supervise people who are low risk. Plus, you don't want to mix low and high risk together. It never adds up to anything good. So it's always keeping that in mind. And again, it's the staff resistance thing. This is big in Curie group world, right? It's teaching, officers that it's okay. You don't have to have quote unquote eyes on people all the time. You need to let them, the lower risk just kind of be. You can always increase their, how much you see them. If they don't do well, you can remove them from, if you have a remote check-in program, you can always change their risk level if they're not doing well or complying. Virtual check-ins. So virtual check-ins are great, not just for low risk, but they're great for anyone that has, has the capability of doing a video chat for scheduled check-ins. It's really good if you have transportation barriers or different barriers, childcare barriers. They can't get into the office. They can't maybe take time off of work, but you can schedule maybe a video chat during their lunch hour. So you're not getting in the way of those pro-social activities that we want them engaged in by having to come into the office, sit in a room. If you're still doing like a cattle call type situation with bringing people in for, check-ins. So there's a lot of really creative ways to use like video chat or virtual check-ins that way. Also, I do not know how many people are doing type of matrix works or incentives at this point. But again, if you're looking at moving forward with those things, how do you integrate, virtual check-ins or even video chat to supplement, hey, you're doing a great job. Next week, next check-in, you don't have to come in and see me. I'm going to send you a video chat link and we could just do our check-in that way. So as a reward. So again, thinking again about how your department's progressing and how do you implement these things. Digital communication, text messaging. This was a big way we communicated with those folks on pretrial. At one point, my staff had, county issued phones that they were given, and they were texting through it. The problem that I found with that is that they would forget to go into our case management system and log what they were doing, and then they delete it, and then it was gone, and they forgot. And I, as a supervisor, was very big on if it's not documented, it never happened. And I really stood true to that, and they knew that. So we were able to, in the FieldWare system that we were using for remote check-in, there's a text messaging, feature in there where it keeps the entire thread. They can actually send pictures through it. So, and it houses everything and it never gets rid of anything. So it was a great tool for us. And especially if we had to go to court and testify, we could print off the text messages and have them in hand and different things. It also, it improves accessibility and improves response time too. So if you're communicating with them, and people tend to respond better to text message than they do a phone call, at least to break the ice. It's not as scary, I think, for some people, especially if you are confronting them possibly on something they didn't quite do right. So we found it extremely effective in communication with people.
I just wanted to add one quick thing in here. Karen had mentioned the standards from APPA. So I know California seems to be pretty good about not over supervising those lower risk clients. I know you have a lot of banked caseloads and things like that. But if you are in a situation where that's something that you're interested in, sometimes we hear from folks like, well, our judges won't let us do that, right? They insist that we see everybody in person. Or, the prosecutor doesn't want that kind of thing to happen. really great information in the standards about why you shouldn't over supervise and why you should look at other ways to deal with your lower risk people. So if you need any backup, that's a great resource. It took a long time for them to put those together. A lot of really smart people worked on those. So I wasn't included on any of that. But there's just great information in there if you need it to help sort of present your case to your judges or your court systems if you need that.
All right, continuing, couple more ideas. So a mobile app, right? So a field app for officers. I know when I was a probation officer and I was in the field, I mean, this is really, again, very long time ago, but I remember taking case files, taking my car, going out, do my home visit, jotting down my notes, in my file. And now you have technology that you can do these things in the field. You don't have to take a laptop. You don't have to take anything with you. You have your phone, right? Your county issued phone. And you can have a mobile app on your phone where you can do real-time data updates, and then it goes back into your case management system. Update your case notes in the field, update, take a picture if you need a current picture of somebody, update address and phone number and employment information. So there's a lot of it really simplifies a lot of things. Reminders, notifications, really quickly. And this is not a mentee question, but it's my question to you. How many people rely on those text reminders from like your doctor's offices about an appointment? You can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat, like, does anybody yeah, I know Nikki, you're like, yes. Anybody else? Like it is where if I don't get that, I will completely forget about my appointments if I don't get that sent to me. So same thing. It's the same thing with the people that we work with. It's about getting those appointment reminders, whether it's about a court date, whether it's about a treatment appointment, you have to attend community service work. I'm coming out for a home visit between 8 and noon on next Tuesday, so you better be there. You have an office appointment with me. It keeps people very organized, and those reminders are huge for people. Especially the people we work with, because a lot of times their life is so chaotic that they really forget and get caught up in things. So what it does in the back end, it really reduces those no-shows, and we'll get to that, in the PowerPoint presentation with a partner that we work with on this, and talk about their pilot that they did. And in the end, it lowers technical violations for the officer. So that busy work of trying to, file these violations because they didn't show up for certain things. It really, when you increase that compliance, you're going to reduce that busy work on the back end for officers, which is, again, then frees them up to do other things.
Okay, we're going to do some more questions. Excuse me. So I've listed them here, but we're going to go through them separately with Mentimeter. So we just want to get an idea with, how you're determining how you supervise clients, how often you need to see them. Are you using reduced supervision as an incentive? Are you utilizing technology at all? And, if any of the things that we've kind of talked about so far, if those are things that you're doing, if it's making a difference in how you supervise your clients. So the first question. Okay, do you use an assessment to determine supervision levels? Okay. So I'm seeing a lot of answers about we use a risk assessment and it guides our supervision levels. Okay. Anybody do assessments, but then you just kind of like tuck them into a folder somewhere and you don't utilize them to determine how often you should be seeing your clients?
Anybody that wants to admit it.
Right. And we can't see who you are, so we're not going to rat anybody out. Okay. Well, that's good to know, because I see that in a lot of places where people say, "Oh yeah, we do risk assessments." And we're like, "Well, what do you do with those?" Well, we stick it in the folder. Like, well, that's not really helping very much, right? Like, you're doing some work, hopefully, to do the assessment properly. And then you're not utilizing it to where it could help you and could help streamline your workflow again. Okay. So our next question, are you using incentives with clients? And so you'll notice we're not talking about sanctions here. We're looking more toward, are you doing things with clients to help them, to help um, praise their good behavior and, hopefully encourage them to keep doing those kinds of things. Okay. You guys are on it in California.
Now, keep in mind, we're not saying not to use sanctions but
Right.
technically, sanctions are supposed to be used, it's supposed to be 4 positives to 1 sanction. So it's supposed to be a 4-to-1 ratio when you're looking at that, or looking if you start doing matrix work at all with incentives and sanctions.
Yeah. And of course, one of the things that Karen mentioned a little while ago was with clients who are doing well. So maybe they come in and they see you for one appointment, and then the next one they're able to, do a video chat with you, which, takes away so many barriers for them. They don't have to find childcare. They don't have to find a ride to get in if they don't have a driver's license. So there are a lot of ways that technology can be used as an incentive with your clients. But they like gift cards too. So there's always that. Okay, so are you leveraging technology to increase client engagement and improve compliance?
And if you've got thoughts around this, like how do you feel like, feel free, again, put it in the chat, unmute,
Yeah.
let's share ideas. I mean, that's what we really wanted this to be about, more so than anything.
Yeah, and Karen, if you see those in the chat, feel free to,
Yep, I'm keeping an eye.
because I'm not seeing the chat right now. Okay, looks like a lot of people are utilizing technology. Okay, and then if you have these, the ability to do digital check-ins, reminders, like we said, with, doctor's appointment kind of things, or virtual communications, are those making a difference in your approach to how you supervise folks? And this is another question, like if you are doing that, if you want to put in the chat what you're doing, we'd be happy to
Or
share.
if you're, oh, I'm sorry, Susan.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just saying
I'll say, and if you're not doing it, go ahead and put in the chat that you're not utilizing these right now, these techniques, because
yeah.
not everybody is. It's kind of a mixed bag right now. Or maybe you're just using one and you're not using the others. So again, this was about, just sharing ideas, getting an idea what's going on out there, what's working, what gaps are there. Okay, before, again, I'm gonna just in the chat. And I wanted to add this as a mentee question, but we already went through it. But I'm really curious, if you had a magic wand and you could pick, it could be 1 or 2 things, technology that you feel that you are missing currently in your office, that you feel would help you be more efficient, either as an agency or maybe just for your officers, what would that be? If it was anything, whatever it is. So again, you can throw it in the chat. So 1 or 2 things that you're missing, that you feel you're missing, that you're like, wow, I wish we had this. What I'm finding when I'm talking to people is that people are coming up with creative things that help now us as a company say, okay, this is the next thing we really need to focus on to make sure we're meeting the needs of, the people who are doing the work right now. And the best ideas come from the people in the field. So, James, can I call you out, or Sean? Like, do you mind unmuting? Because when you say AI, what would you envision? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, seriously. What would you envision AI? How would it help you or help your agency or help your officers? If one of you don't mind unmuting and
Report
talking.
writing or like maybe decision trees or that kind of stuff.
So like report writing and having AI help with that, so they're not the note taking and things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on AI? Because that is an up and coming next step for a lot of agencies and in government entities. Okay, if you think of something really creative, we want to know about it. So we want to know again how we can help, help you guys out and where are the gaps right now? So, use of technology and probation and the why. So we're going to cover 4 areas. We're going to cover efficiency, accountability, safety, and sustainability. And we're going to walk through these one at a time about what each of these mean, but also the why behind it, the why it's important. And when I was a supervisor and I was told, by my manager, like, hey, we're going to be doing this now. And I'm like, oh, geez, I can only hear my staff now. They're going to complain, they're going to push back, they're going to be resistant. And so it's really important. I always felt like when you introduce anything, you follow it up with the why. The why is the understanding. Why are we being asked to do that? And so that I think is a big piece of that resistance and buy-in from staff is so they're just not being told they have to do it, but of the understanding piece, the why behind it. So, okay, Susan.
You ready?
I am ready. So efficiency. So again, going back to virtual check-ins, automated case management, now that could now include AI as we kind of move forward down this road of technology. So again, using risk assessment tools, case management, centralized documentation, streamlining workflows. My case management system at my county was horrible with workflow. It was really great about capturing information on an individual level, but when my staff managing that level of a caseload, it did not tell them, what do I have to take care of today, next week, maybe in the next 2 weeks. And that for workflow when you're carrying caseloads is so imperative. What conditions? Do I have somebody coming up for an expiration? Have they completed all their conditions? Instead of scrambling at the last minute, did they complete it and you're in a, time crunch? It's letting technology inform your staff. What do they need to take care of and what tasks are due? And in one place, one easy way of viewing it versus an individual looking at their whole caseload and what's due. What do I have to worry about right now? It's huge. It makes things so much more efficient. The automated notifications, text, email, phone reminders, reducing all those, technical violations, all that busy work. Again, remote check-ins, whether it's by phone, web, app, video, again, reduces the same reduces in-person visits, that people that don't need to be there, using it as incentives, saving time, reducing those barriers. And then virtual services. So again, video and online support, improves access for clients. But now it comes down to the why. Why is this important? What does it do to help staff, help agencies? So again, the reminders, they help them stay on track. Period. If you use reminders for appointments in different things that they have to do, your compliance rate will increase. Trust me on this. In pretrial world, the one thing research-based all day long, the one thing that improves people attending court, it's not bond money, it's not anything, it's court reminders. That's it. It's reminding them. Risk-based decisions. So again, help analytics focus officers' time where it's needed most. Use your risk assessment accordingly. Streamline communication. So again, it's fast, secure, sharing information, with providers, with courts, using technology to get that communication, not an email, not a fax, using what you have to, get that communication going across a lot faster. Reduce workload and costs. Again, automation will save time. It will save resources. It will fill that gap if you cannot, fill a spot for some reason because your budget has been cut and you're down a staff. How do you use technology to fill that spot? Positive reinforcement. Again, track progress, reward compliance, use technology to help with those things as a step down. It reminds me, I sat on a felony drug court for 10 years. It reminds me of phases in drug court. So anybody or treatment courts, anybody who's familiar with treatment courts, right? They have a step down. By the time you get to 3 or 4, you're not going in as much. You're not going to court as much. You're not seeing your probation officer as much. There's a lot more hands off. Same thing. Let them see how they do. So stepping people down when they're compliant, even if you're able to at moderate, I would say, start stepping them down if you have that ability to do that in your office. If they don't do well, you can always increase it again. But eventually they're going to be off paper. Eventually they are going to be on their own. We have to let them fly a little bit.
Okay. Karen, I think we're going to have to speed things up here because
I know.
and we didn't know if we'd have enough material.
Yeah.
So just want to talk a little bit about accountability. Effective communication and case management is so important. Our clients need to know exactly what we're trying to get them to do. They need to know, again, the why about things. And so being able to communicate with them is so important. I loved using text messaging with my clients. And I tell everyone, if you're not doing that, you should. I had so many that I always kept a small caseload, and I had a lot of people that would come in and tell me like, "Oh, everything's great. Things are going so well." And I had one client that would do that every single appointment, and he would leave, and within a half an hour, I knew I was going to get a text message from him that said like, things maybe aren't quite so great. And then he'd just spell everything out for me in text message. So I knew what was going on with him. So for a lot of folks, it is an easier way for them to communicate. And let's face it, we break up with people over text messages, and sometimes that's the only way I hear from my kids. So definitely very, very important there. By using things like this and, using communication and technology, it's easier, I think, to stay up to date on things with clients. When I was working for a long time, the process was, they would call in and they would either leave a voicemail or they would leave, my secretaries love to take the messages for me and write them down. And I think it's just because sometimes they were a little bit nosy and they wanted to know what was going on. But there was a lag time in people getting responses. Where if you're utilizing technology, you can respond to folks, you can respond to somebody from your cell phone when you're sitting in court waiting on a case to be called. You can respond, depending on where you are during the day and what your thoughts are on, do I respond to someone after hours if they send me a text message? Obviously, that's a policy decision or a decision your officers have to make. But there's just a lot more opportunities to have that one-to-one quick communication with somebody. Virtual caseloads, a lot of times what we hear from folks is well, if I let people start checking in online or they call in for their appointment, it's that out of sight, out of mind, right? We're going to forget that they're out there. We're going to forget that we need to keep track of things that they are supposed to do. A good virtual reporting program will do that for you. Okay. So the programs will be set up to where it's not just that the clients call in and they're out of sight, out of mind. Officers should then be seeing your client called in or they didn't call in. And the system should be able to tell you, did they call? How many times did they missed? How many times has somebody reminded them that they need to make that call? It will give you a lot of information so that those folks aren't just out of sight, out of mind. And if they still have conditions to meet, people can report virtually and still have conditions they need to get done. But if they're low risk, they're going to do those things, whether that reporting to you is virtual or in your office. We hear a lot from folks like, well, they need to come in so I can personally remind them that they need to get something done. If they're low risk, that you don't need to do that. You can remind them through a reminder message about something, or if they report virtually, they get a reminder about a condition in conjunction with that reporting. A lot of ways you can use technology to streamline that. And again, just keeping that communication consistent definitely supports a more successful outcome with your clients.
Oh, Susan, there's something in the chat.
Okay.
So Vanessa, are there concerns that this could have a negative impact on staff feeling they need to be responsive at all hours or immediately? And are there concerns that we are not working with clients on their skills regarding human interaction if everything is automated? So I don't know if you want to take that or I can take that.
Go ahead.
So thanks, Vanessa. So I would say, I mean, again, coming from some place that did everything remote, um, you know, there was no feeling that we needed to react at all hours. I mean, you are within your working time. I think part of it too is when you're putting the right people on this type of system, again, they're low risk. Does that mean that they will have no issues that come up, that things will happen, they're going to need resources? Absolutely. My staff used to talk to people all the time. But it was very clear when we enrolled somebody, listen, these are our working hours. If you have something after hours that comes up, we made sure they had resources. It was all in the intake paperwork that we gave them. They understood all of it. But the staff was very responsive if they did need to talk to them. Because when they did the check-in, they'd be able to leave messages for them. They were asked a series of questions and updates and different things like that, and my staff would respond to that. As far as not working with them on their skills, again, when you're talking about like, I'm going to go with skills as far as like risk, risk level needs, right? Criminogenic risks and needs. People who score low on that are really not going to need a lot of work on those areas. They may need situational interaction on certain things. Like, oh my gosh, I lost my job. I blew up at my boss. I'm I need some help. Okay, let's talk through this. When I was, and I'm going to just flip onto the Carrie side for a second, but, this would come up. And what I would tell, folks is that, listen, they still will need your attention. And they had like they're called bits, if anybody's familiar with Carrie guides, but they're like one sheeters. Like they're very situational, like, oh, let's walk through this. And how could you have handled this differently? So again, just because somebody's on that type of system doesn't mean that you're not going to have interaction or things aren't going to come up or you're not going to have that ability to work with people. You just need to really have officers focus on the people who are higher risk and that have more potential for causing problematic behavior in the community, if that makes sense. And I hope I answered your question, Vanessa, or maybe I answered it too much. Don't know.
And I'll just throw into that I did not, by no means did I intend to say like, oh, you should just, respond to text messages any time of day. I just don't have very good boundaries. And so for me, if I would get a message from one of my clients, and it's 8 o'clock at night, my brain just kind of always went like, if you're not doing anything, like, why not just respond now? Because maybe you'll prevent a problem from happening that you're going to have to spend more time responding to the next day. But again, I have very limited boundaries. I probably should not have done that. So I hope I didn't mean to imply that everybody should do that.
And Vanessa, if you want to talk sidebar, like probably got my email. So just shoot me an email and you and I can set up a time just to chat too if you want to kind of run through some things. I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay. And then again, the why. So the why, this is a Karen thing. We always have to explain the why. And I'm sure this comes from the Carrie Guide training.
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
It
Oh my
doesn't. It
goodness.
comes from me as a supervisor. Yeah,
Okay.
that's my thing.
So where this can be, what this can help with and why would we look at using technology for some of these things? it makes it easy to streamline and monitor that compliance. Officers, again, if you're using a good system, they can review data very easily. They can see, you know, where they need to maybe step in. And sometimes you do need to step in and bring somebody into the office for an appointment with you to talk about things and get them back on track. A lot of other things you can do remotely. You can send documents to clients. If you do, you know, maybe you're doing carry guides or something with them. And I know they have their own kind of online stuff that you can do, but any kind of programs, you can send those documents to your clients electronically and, you know, not necessarily have to have them right there in the office with you. Again, reduces barriers for people. You know, I think sometimes, you know, we just, if we need to go somewhere, we hop in our car and go, right? Because we have a driver's license, we have a car. A lot of our clients don't, right? They don't have transportation. They don't have money to pay for gas to drive to an appointment that might be, you know, 30 minutes away. So it gives them a lot of other options for how they can check in. And then again, you want to kind of balance, you know, can we put somebody on totally remote check-in? Yes, and we're going to talk about that with some folks. But you know, do you need to look at, maybe it's a combination again of you come in and see me 1 month and the next month you can check in remotely. So you got to find the right balance there. And then again, we believe that it's an effective way to supervise folks who again are low risk, don't need a whole lot of individual contact with folks. And it just provides a lot of different options for them. All right.
Safety. So again, we mentioned Field app, right? I already mentioned the good things about the Field app, you know, the on the fly, access your caseload easily, take a picture of somebody. The other thing though about all that, the update is great, but it's also about officer safety. And by that, what I meant by that is that when you have, you know, officers cover for each other, right? Somebody's off, they're in Hawaii having a great time, you're stuck here, I mean, being stuck in California, I wouldn't say you're stuck, but you're stuck in Michigan.
Yeah.
And you know, you have to cover, you know, so you know, you don't know the other person's caseload, right? You don't know that person. So when you go out, I mean, to have that ability to see their picture, make sure it's the right person, you know, see any alerts that's maybe, you know, on my, you know, on the caseload on my phone. So it's really easy. You know, like, hey, they've got a big dog in their yard, or they, you know, have a prior gun charge or whatever it is. So it's very helpful for other officers that cover for each other, for a safety reason. The other thing that the tool can do is that if you decide you're going to see 5 people, you can actually take it and email your route, who I'm going to see, their address, their information, and send it to the supervisor. Say, this is where I'm going for the day. So again, it helps with that officer safety oversight, you know, when people are going into the field. So, you know, it's just something that we have to be aware of. It's just part of the job, but there's a lot of benefits to this. And I probably just answered the why as well. So I probably answered my next slide. So yeah, I absolutely did. The other thing too is, you know, flexibility. So if you have areas that are not in Wi-Fi, doing the updates, you don't have to worry about if you're in Wi-Fi or not, because as soon as you hit Wi-Fi, boom, it all updates. So nice and simple. Don't have to worry about going back, making notes when you get back, remembering what happened, you know, all the other things that I mentioned.
A quick question. Can I
Yeah.
jump in? I want to point to something that was mentioned earlier in the Mentimeter and kind of related to the last couple slides about ensuring that staff is kind of on the same page when implementing certain things. I remember the word training came up. So what would you kind of say to departments who are grappling with making sure that staff are aware of when a new, you know, implementing like new technology and what that means going forward, so that everyone's kind of on the same page and like try to make the technology work for us? What would you all kind of say there?
So I always think a good approach is to try to engage your staff in the planning for that. Because, you know, I mean, there were things when I was a chief, there were things that, I just sometimes had to go in and say, like, we're doing this, right? Like, wish we could talk about it more, but it's just something that we have to do. We've got to get it done. But things definitely went over better when I had the time to say, okay, we need to do something like this, but I want your input. I want some folks in the office, if you'll volunteer to help work on this, that would be great. Because if you can get people to kind of buy in before you actually have to implement something, it's a little more meaningful to them. And you've got other people in the office who can support you as the leader, with whatever the new thing is. So if it's technology and you've got some folks in the office that are like, oh yeah, I tried this out, it's great, or I think this is really going to help us do this. I think that makes a difference with folks.
Finding your champion, Susan. Find
Yes.
your champion in your office that embraces change and embraces whatever you're trying to release. And then let a peer champion the change. And it makes such a big difference when you can find that person in your office.
Yeah. Okay, great question. Love it. Okay, so our next question on Mentimeter is your department struggling to keep positions filled? So we've got 2 yeses and a no.
Uh-oh, where's everybody else? We know we have more people on than that.
Did we put everybody to sleep already?
I know, right?
Okay. Well, it looks like in general, most people are saying, yes, it's been difficult for us. And like we talked about earlier, like that is across the country. People are really having a difficult time with that right now. Okay. And then I think this is actually our last Mentimeter question, but how do you think, or if you can, how do millennials different from older workers? And if you can do this in 3 words or less. And millennials, gosh, I meant to write down the dates when millennials were born. So I think millennials are like 1965 to, I can't remember.
Really? No.
No. Millennials are later than that. I'm thinking,
Yeah, because I know I'm not a millennial,
no. I
so
was thinking of I don't know, Generation X or
yes.
millennials are your younger, like 20-ish
Yeah, they're my kids.
ages. Yeah.
Vacation, better work-life balance. Yeah, time, right? So that's what they're more worried about. They're not worried so much, I find, about benefits and the things that, like, when I started, hired in years ago, nobody ever left the county. Nobody ever left. Oh my God, I've got great benefits. Oh, what, they're giving me what for retirement? And now it is so, like, they can't keep people, and it shocks me now.
Yeah, I know when I first transitioned like out of county government and working in the private sector, the company I worked for kind of had this policy that if we were going to hire someone new, they did like group interviews and they, all the people in the company got to participate in this. It was a small company. But I looked at things like I would look at resumes and people had been at like 4 different jobs in the past 6 or 7 years. And I was like, why would you even consider hiring someone like this? They're going to stay here a couple years, they're going to be gone. It is so different now. Like that's a typical thing is for folks to
Yeah.
kind of bounce from job to job to job until they find the place where I think they fit best and where they feel the most comfortable. Which I still struggle with that. So um but yeah, so in general,
Oh, oh, sorry. Vanessa
oh,
had
good.
something. She goes, mine was supposed to say take vacation time. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of good, not just yeah.
So what we found in some of the research that we did for this is, this next generation, they're digital first, right? Because, these are the kids that have grown up using laptops and tablets all the way, from grade school on. So they're definitely digital's their first priority. They're mission driven, which I think is interesting. And they are expecting modern systems that support their efficiency and their well-being. So as a workforce, we have to focus on those things. You know, like Karen said, we can no longer say like, oh, we've got great benefits and the salary's good. I have a son who's 28, has a degree in geology, could go work for an oil company and make a lot of money. And trust me, I have suggested that to him multiple times. What he likes to do is be out looking for rocks, right? And doing things that are in the outdoors and that he can just, you know, kind of hang out and do the things he enjoys doing. And he has said to me so many times, like, Mom, I want a job where I'm happy. Like, I don't really care how much money I make as long as I'm making enough to support myself. Whereas I think, you know, older generations, like we were much more focused on how much are you going to pay me? How much can I make? You know, and this profession is not one where people come into it because we're going to make a gazillion dollars. But there's been a lot of work done too to raise the salary of people that work in our field. So I think we have to start looking at what are the other things that we can offer to our clients. Again, technology, technology, technology. That's what they've used. That's what they're used to using, and they want to do that. We were talking a little, you know, before about AI. I use AI every single day in my job, and Karen probably gets tired of me because I'll call her and I'll be like, "You're not gonna believe what AI just said. Like, it rewrote this whole thing for me." But you know, that's something that we need to look at. Um, in our workflow. So if we can utilize technology, what does that do for those officers that are interested in that? Again, it centralizes their case management, saves them time. Things are able to be automated, which is very um, um, interesting for them and something that they like. Um, it makes reporting easier, right? So they can spend more time with those higher risk clients that, you know, if you get into this field because like I want to help people. I want to hold them accountable, but I want to help people. Well, you've got to have the time to work with them to do that. And if you're just shuffling them in and out, in and out, in and out for appointments, because you've got so many people that you have to see based on your standards, you don't have time to do that. So technology can make that a lot easier for them. And then again, it can help just with a lot of administrative burdens. We hear over and over and over, I don't want to have to do multiple work. Like I don't want to have to do things twice. So if we can automate those things where case notes can easily go into your system, again, like, you know, using a mobile app, getting those notes done in the field, and then you push them right back into your system. Reminders, everything that's related to technology is going to be helpful for your staff and keeping them engaged. Okay. Other things with kind of the younger generations, work-life balance. So this is where, you know, taking your vacation. And I mean, how many of us, especially, you know, people who've been around for a while, how many of us have given time back to our counties because we didn't take our vacation? I know I used to do that, and not purposefully, right? But I would just be like, well, I'm busy. I can't take vacation time right now. Younger group, they're taking their vacation time, and we need to make sure that they do take it because it makes them, I think, puts people in a better spot in terms of their mental health and the way they feel about their job. Um, and then folks I see too, they want to know um, how can I move up in the system, right? So it's hard. I know, you know, if you're in a small department and there are not a lot of places to advance, sometimes it's hard to do that. But the more things that we can offer to our employees in terms of how they can advance, how they can do better things within the organization, excuse me, it's definitely going to be beneficial to them in the end. And it's going to be beneficial to you because when you get those folks that are pretty bright, you know, if you can find ways to keep them engaged and keep them within your department, it's definitely a win-win for both you and for that client, or not client, that employee.
I think you got the why.
Karen, I think yeah, I think we
think you
I
covered the
think we've
why.
done pretty good here in doing that. I told you we need to speed things up. So
Yep.
here we go.
We
Um,
want to be mindful of your time. So,
yes, absolutely. So I'm gonna skip on over this and we'll just go into the next slide.
I'm just going to really quickly go over the key takeaways from what we just went over. And so we're getting close to wrapping up here. But you know, increased efficiency, productivity, again, adoption of technology, you know, increasing staff morale and retention. We covered that. Again, offering, tech-driven tools, improving job satisfaction, reducing turnover, makes our lives a lot easier. How to get a stronger workforce, adaptability. Next one, there we go. Good thing I have it up on my other screen.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I
Bit.
actually clicked on something else and it made it.
So how to overcome resistance, embrace new tools, help them adapt. Again, when you are launching something new, and if it's new technology from a company, they should be helping you train those staff to embrace the new change as well, side by side, helping you with that why. I can't stress that enough. Having someone there to help and be with you, during that changeover. The budget impact, improving the value of technology, gradual implementation, baby steps sometimes, one piece at a time. But if you increase, insert technology into what you do, you will reduce costs in the long run. So over time, different administrative hours, different things. All right, last slide on this, better outcomes. Again, we want to improve outcomes, use best practices, right? Hold them accountable, hold them, increase compliance. So use those tools. And then resource allocation. So again, changing so you can shift caseloads. Allocate where people are supposed to, how you're monitoring and supervising people. How to improve decision-making and outcomes using that, that risk assessment and trusting it.
Yep. Okay, so we'll go through these quickly. We just want to highlight what some agencies and other states are doing. And so again, we'll go through this pretty quickly because I know we're getting close to the end. So Missouri, the Missouri Department of Correction, some of their key challenges were, we know that we're over supervising our low risk clients. We want to find a way to stop doing that. Our officers need more time to prioritize the higher risk clients. So let's get rid of the low risk, minimal supervision for them. Let's prioritize the high risk people. Their policies were not very consistent across the state. So you had a lot of officers just kind of, figuring out on their own what they wanted to do with clients. And there was some hesitation about that due to some of the possible consequences that could come up. So what they ended up doing was they changed their policy. They said, we're going to put all of our low risk people on remote reporting. So they either call in for their appointment or they report online. It was policy. There was no officer discretion in it. Now, there were some exclusions to that. There were some low risk people that didn't qualify for the program. But for the most part, if they were low risk and they weren't in those exclusionary categories, they went on remote reporting. The results, what happened with that? Officer workloads were more evenly distributed. A lot of them would say, like, okay, we're going to have this officer supervise 300 people that are on remote reporting, but that's working for them. So it made things easier for the officers. Whoop, did not mean to do that. Let's see if I can get back. Yes. Technology took the place of a lot of the manual work that officers had been doing. And at this point, they're consistent with best practices, right? So best practice says don't over supervise your low risk, utilize remote reporting for them. They're in compliance with that at this point in time. And just funny with Missouri, when we trained out there were a lot of officers who told us this will never work. It's a terrible idea. You're like, you people are crazy. Bad idea. Those have now become some of our biggest champions. So people that were very much against this saw how much it benefited them to be able to do this, became champions of ours. Okay, so pretrial, parole, probation, just management best practices. What does that look like? Risk-based supervision. We've talked about that a lot today, and we all understand what that is. Remote check-ins, removing those barriers for folks, giving officers more time to prioritize those higher risk clients. And then using incentives and long-term planning helps to support sustained engagement and behavior change. Okay. I think I missed. No, I guess I didn't. Um, okay. We've talked a lot about virtual track or check-ins. Really more, this is more like, this is what it looks like, right? This is what it looks like on a computer for someone to go in and check in. They can do computers, they can do tablets, they can check in from their phone. So how great would that be for someone to just like, log into a system on their phone, fill out their information, it gets pushed right back to the officer. They can look through things, see if there are any changes, anything they need to deal with, and then that gets pushed back into their case management system. One thing that can be done too is special conditions. So again, we talked about that out of sight, out of mind. How are people going to know if I'm not telling them in person, like, you got to go to counseling, you got to do community service, how are they going to know? They can get those messages through their phone when they do those check-ins. They get those reminders. Don't forget, you got community service to get done. Okay.
So we're going to talk
Karen,
about
you're doing
Tennessee. What was that?
No, I said, Karen, you're doing Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I am. So Tennessee, so I was part of their pilot program. So about a year and a half ago or so, they were really finding that a lot of their folks were non-compliant due to not showing up for different appointments that they had to attend, whether it was an assessment, a polygraph, their office visit, going to a home visit, whatever it was, their employment group, their community service work. So what they wanted to do is test it. Like, does this really work? What I was talking about earlier, those notifications would really increase compliance. So they did a pilot project in 3 districts, and this is Tennessee Department of Corrections, so across the state of Tennessee. So they moved to, a state, they have since, moved to a statewide notification system after the pilot. So during the pilot, what they found 60 days prior to adding notifications, so pre-pilot, they had a 40% average no-show rate in those 3 districts. So, which mean, again, a lot of officers doing a lot of technical violations, a lot of follow-up, a lot of rescheduling. During the first 60 days of that pilot, those no-show, the rate reduced by 15%. So it almost cut in half what their no-show rate was. So just 60 days in. It was so wildly successful that they then have now since launched it statewide now for over a year. They've added probably 12 different types of appointments that people get reminded of by text and by phone. And it has been very, very successful in the state of Tennessee. And again, what we have done to help them, we did on-site training with them. We train their officers. We do the text and call reminders to reduce that. We notify the officer if the reminders weren't received. And then we customized their appointments based on their agency workflow. So again, it has really helped officers in balancing those caseloads by just increasing compliance with the folks that they're working with.
Okay. We also work in Florida. One of their issues there was that their officers working in the field, hard to access information. It was slow. They had a delay in, putting their notes back into the system. So I think we all remember the days where we would go to do home visits and like we would take paper files with us to do that. So we're lugging all these, manila folders around with us with client information in them. And so that's what they were looking at in Florida. So they weren't able to easily access the information they needed on their clients. There's some safety issues in there. So there was not a lot of real-time data that they had on their clients when they went to do these check-ins. Things like big dog in the yard that Karen mentioned earlier. Again, overloaded with paperwork and inefficient systems. So what we looked at with them and what they ended up doing is they have a mobile application for their probation officers that's downloaded onto their phone. And when they go into the field, they're able to pull up their clients. They're able to map out a route to go see them. I'm going to see these 5 clients today. I'm going here first, then here, second, and third. They have all the information they need on their phone for their clients. So they've got addresses, and they've got their conditions of supervision and anything they've been working on. All the case notes are in there. And then they're able to update that from the field. So they can update demographic information. So if somebody has maybe a different phone number or they've changed their employment, they can update that in the field. They can also do case notes. And so we looked back at just the past 3 months in Florida. They had 375 demographic updates. So not a huge number there, but that's still 375 that you didn't have to go back and manually put into your system. And then their narratives, I think this is a better picture of how helpful the mobile apps can be. They had 22,000 updates for narratives. Those are case notes that have gone into the system that, again, the officer can, talk into the phone, like they can pull up the notes and they can just, talk into the phone, and it's going to record that information and talk to text. And then it pushes it back into your case management system. So super easy. They don't have to go back to the office later and be like, what did I talk to them about? I don't remember. And, or doing double work again, writing it down and then having to go put it into a computer system. Just a couple screenshots in here, what a mobile application looks like. You've got the client's information, you've got their picture in there. Again, you can update all these different features or different fields within the system, all from a smartphone.
All right, I think I have like 2 minutes. And really quickly, I just want to highlight somebody from California, Riverside Probation. So if anybody from Riverside's on here, giving me a little nod. So they actually are using us for something different. So they had an issue with scheduling. They have a lot of complex schedules in their probation department, union rules, different shifts. So they also are looking for a centralized solution for asset management and training. And also a mobile workforce app for officers and supervisors for a time approval, vacation approval, different things like that. So what we provide for Riverside is just that, a centralized scheduling and staffing based on their workflow and their policy. We have the ability now to control asset assignments, returns, and again, data security. So this is a different focus for probation as probation kind of changes and morphs into different things. But again, they were looking for a scheduling solution to help them with all their complex things that they have going on in Riverside. So again, what we do is we automate unique schedules, staffing assignments, control unnecessary overtime. We forecast staffing level requirements. We track assets in real time. Training stays up to date based on position requirements. So again, just something unique that Riverside Probation is using us for. I think like at this point, Susan, we should probably, because we're at time, kind of skip really quickly. AI just, is on our radar completely. And we're looking at the bottom, we're looking at adding a self-service application for when people come into the office. So people can do all those compliance updates in the office before they go back to see the officer. So when they do meet with the officer in their, in the office, they can really focus in on those important things, that you're trying when you're trying to make change. So that is coming down the pipe really soon. Beyond that, I guess we can probably pretty much skip to the end.
I think we can't. Well, look at there. We're right at the end.
Right at 6. Well, sorry, 6 our time. So
yeah. Yeah.
So we just want to thank everybody, and we got a little shout out to our California partners on the slide. So San Mateo, San Joaquin, San Francisco, Monterey, Solano, Yolo, Sonoma, Humboldt, Shasta, Riverside. We love our agency partners very much. We're so proud to be able to work with them and help provide some efficiencies for them. So if anybody is interested in talking to us more, either it's just about ideas or finding out more about our products, please, there's a QR code, phone number. I will say here in the chat, I will put my email, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to connect with anybody that sees this webinar, obviously.
Thank
And
you.
I'd love to come out to California more.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Karen and Susan, for the presentation. Just a reminder, we will send out the presentation to folks. Well, thank you so much for your time and for all the information.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
for
all. We
having
appreciate
us.
it.
Yeah.